Let me just introduce my first question. Please take a seat, and then ask the hall to have this opportunity, because one thing you learn about the United Arab Emirates is an extraordinary cooperation and community among the leadership. And the minister has been integrally involved in the preparation and the evolution of this monumental task that your country has taken on to host the world in what I see is probably the last serious attempt to deal with the climate crisis. If we fail at COP28, I'm afraid that most of the world would lose confidence in this process. So it's an enormous responsibility. And we now have this opportunity not just to ask questions, but we will invite a few other climate ministers to join us on the stage in a moment. But let me first ask you this. You were one of the very few ministers who turned up at the Biodiversity COP. You might be aware, most of you in the audience, that the international attempt to preserve the biodiversity is a separate track from the climate and the COP track, but of huge importance because we are already losing a big part of the planet's biodiversity. But this COP was a success. To everybody's surprise, it was a success. You were one of the few ministers who had the wisdom to turn up. So you had the first-hand knowledge of why it succeeded. So my first question is, why did the Biodiversity COP succeed, where most of the other climate COPs have not?
First of all, let me tell you, we in the UAE, the late founding father, His Highness Sheikh Saeed, he was someone who so much loved the environment. Look, he wasn't a person who went a lot into the media, and that's why many people don't know about what he did, but he's really left a legacy. And in a way, it's in our DNA as well. So, I dive, do a bit of diving in the UAE, and I've seen firsthand what we're doing to nature. I've also had a few years of my life living in Germany. And just seeing with my own eyes the changes that we're going through, and all of you are seeing this in your own country, and it just leaves you thinking, okay, now I have an opportunity to do something, to change something. And if I look at the last 10 years I've been in the government, it's really been always pushing, we need to do more, and biodiversity is so interlinked with climate, with food, and because I've been very active on the food systems agenda, it's just always come in that biodiversity has the link into food and into so many other aspects. And so that's why I made it a point to make sure that I was there. For me, whenever you can move a needle on something, it comes because there are certain champions that are really pushing the needle, pushing the bar to make sure that certain things get done, certain initiatives get pushed through. And I think the world needs more champions. And we've got the advantage, Your Excellency, that the UAE can plan long-term. I, as a minister, we don't have a 4-year period. I never know when my term could end, but in a way this keeps me on my toes to make sure we're always delivering. But the beauty is we can always plan long-term. And so this is my insights on why I think we've managed to make sure, and this is why the Emirates Declaration for Food Systems has the biodiversity link in it as well, and we're looking for all countries to support that.
Great, so let's have the lights up and put your hands up if you want to take this opportunity to ask a question. Yes, there's one there.
Yeah.
By the door, yes. And then there's one here in the middle, yes. Bring the microphone there, but while you put your question. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Stefán Jón Hafstein, and I'm from Iceland. And thank you for the last time we met. That was at the School Meals Coalition meeting in Helsinki last year. And I thank you very much for your support. and also for your dedication to bringing the food issues to the climate dialogue. I'm speaking here as a chair of the Aquatic Blue Food Coalition, and I thank you for your dedication and support to our agenda, which we've been discussing with your people over the year. But I would like to put to you an issue Mr. Grimson put to you, and thank you for being at the COP15, but do you sense that leaders of the world are sensitive to the fact that biodiversity, climate, and food are interrelated and need to be discussed at the same time? Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And I do remember the wonderful meal we had in Helsinki as well. So you'll be pleased to know that at the COP28, I'm holding a ministerial on the 30 by 30, and also making sure that we have those conversations at the UNFCCC conference to make sure that basically everyone understands the interlinkages. There's a lot going on right now for nature-based solutions. The UAE has also announced the platform on the Mangroves Alliance for Climate. 17 countries are on board on that as well. And it's really important that this ministerial is for the first time and will take place at COP28, which really shows the linkages of biodiversity with climate change. Look, there's always room for more that we can do, but I think this is a great start, and we will definitely push more on that front to make sure that the biodiversity agenda has its attention and to be also on center stage. As you may also know, our climate champion, Her Excellency Razan, she's the higher climate champion. She is also very much pushing the nature agenda to make sure there's also the ministerial level or the high level panels are there to ensure that climate and biodiversity get the attention and come together.
We have a question here. Yes, please. Yeah.
My name is Barry Gardner. I'm a Member of Parliament in the UK. I want to appeal to you as a diver minister. You said you were a diver.
Yes.
You will know that as the Arctic ice recedes, the competition for mineral exploration grows. And 14 countries now have been prepared to issue licenses for deep sea mining on the seabed. The International Seabed Authority has said that there should be a precautionary principle banning that at the moment, stopping that at the moment, until we know more.
Yes.
Do you believe that those 14 countries that are prepared to issue licenses should be doing so? And should we not be making sure that the economic benefits that countries no doubt wish to compete for should take second place to the environmental preservation that we all so much as divers want to see?
Thank you. Thank you. First of all, it wouldn't be right for me to talk about on behalf of other countries. I would not be able to do so. Look, it's always easier said than done. I'm just going to put us in a certain situation. When you look at clothes, for example, and you see a label which says this is sustainably sourced or from sustainably sourced material, do people buy it because it's sustainably sourced, or do they look at the price? Unfortunately, most of them will look at price. I mean, it's a reality that we're all going through. But what's important here is that countries need to, we know what we should be doing, but in reality on the ground, what's happening is always a question of who's championing this, what countries feel more strongly about it. Do they have the backup of the leaders, or is it private sector in their countries that are pushing them? There's so many things around this. So it's a very difficult question to answer. We know what it should be, but on the ground, this may not happen. But I think it's up to all of us to really look at innovations, research and development to try and drive down costs, so at least it has a fair share to be compared to. That's what I can say to that. Thank you.
So let us bring your colleagues here on the stage, if you can bring the chairs also when I invite the other climate ministers to join us on stage. But meantime, If there is a question here, yes, there's one there, please.
Thank you so
So
much.
please come up here for the other ministers and take a seat. Yeah, please.
Thank you. My name is Piyusha. I'm a master's student at the Fletcher School at Tufts University in the United States. I know that you've spoken of your commitment to small state diplomacy, and I'm wondering how can the UAE and Iceland collaborate on success in climate at the COP and in the Arctic and beyond? Thank you.
Do you want to say something to that, Your Excellency, or shall I
Yes,
just
yes.
go? Okay. My colleague Sultan actually said very much how the UAE really is a bridge builder to so many countries. And actually, I myself and also His Excellency, we've been traveling quite a bit these past few months because for us it was important to listen and to understand the needs of the SIDS and also developing countries in general. What we saw was it was always about money. Everyone kept saying, we want to, we have programs, but we cannot get the funding. And that's why it is so critical that at COP28 we fix climate finance. And this is something that Sultan has put a big priority on, and we hope that the $100 billion per year for 5 years from developed countries, that gets activated and is on the road. Also to the climate, doubling the climate finance, he's working on that. But we're also trying to work on creating new finance vehicles because we understand that the financial institutions as they are today, to change them is so difficult. And so we need to create these new mini vehicles where, again, champions come together and say, you know what, we're willing to take a little bit more risk. What are the programs we want to make sure that they get funded? And how can we work as a team to de-risk it in a way that, again, doesn't put so many conditions on the countries that actually need to get accelerated and off the ground? So I really can only say, I hope I see a lot of you in Dubai in 41 days. But the project or the topic of climate finance is central to be done, to be able to bring SIDS and developing countries into the just transition that we need. Thank you.
Well, we have now, as you've seen on the screen behind me, joined by two ministers for environment and energy from Scotland and Iceland. So maybe in order to move into the second phase of this discussion, dialogue, before I invite the hall to continue with their questions, if I can ask the two of you to react to what you have heard, both from Her Excellency, the Minister here, but also from Dr. Sultan Al-Jaber, and how you view the challenge of COP28, giving your ministerial responsibility that you have been engaged with a democratic mandate to lead us on this journey. Gillian, if you start.
Thank you, Oliver. We met this morning, and so I got a bit of advance notice about some of the themes that was going to be a focus of COP28. And there's a couple of things I'm particularly impressed by, because I think it's time to stop talking about targets and start talking about real concrete action a lot more in everything that we do. Most countries have got their targets already. Scotland's got very stretching targets of net zero by 2045, but a more pressing target of 75% greenhouse gas emissions by 2030. And one of the things that I'm impressed by is the focus that has been brought into this particular COP about health and about food, because those are two areas that are so interlinked into climate change and indeed biodiversity as well. In Scotland, one of the things that's in our programme for government this year is a reform of the support for agriculture. And support for agriculture traditionally has been about yield and I suppose size of the farm that a person is applying for support for. Now what we want to do is we want to recognise where there is good sustainable farming happening, where there is reduction in emissions, where there is planting that promotes sequestration of carbon, where there are parts of a farm given over to improving biodiversity, lots of things that are being done by food producers already, but actually putting a value on this in terms of support to encourage those that maybe aren't doing that to do a little bit more. And we were speaking about that this morning, and that food sustainability is just one area, and it leads to, I think, one of the things that Scotland, I think, has been a leader as well in what was talked about here, is about the duty that we have, particularly as northern regions, to share our expertise in those countries that are being affected by climate change, but also to take our responsibility for loss and damage. And Scotland, I hope you recognise our leader in that. First, when we held COP26 in Glasgow, our former First Minister was committed to funding for loss and damage, and it's great to see that that's something that is going to be carried on in COP28, that discussion about our responsibility to help our more global south and the neighbours who have long had a lot of promises made to them. We're a small country. We're a small country that's got a devolved government. But if we're able to sort of signal our intention and maybe have a snowball effect with other countries getting involved more in actually putting funding into helping those countries that are really facing, and it's not just the global south, of course, there's a lot of countries that are represented here that are facing difficulties as a result of climate change, and I think it's incumbent on all of us to have that action-based focus on all those areas.
Guðlaugur.
Yes, thank you. I'm just thinking about that I'm here between representative of two small countries. We have 400,000, just for the record. But I think I agree that I think the main thing is that we will not be judged on what we say. We will be judged on what we do. And I think it's really important that all the things that we are saying, that we want to do, our aims and so on, we need to put that into action. And I've been thinking about this, of course, for quite a while, and sometimes I am worried about, because we know the situation, we know how we need to adapt, and we need to research and have the best information and so on. But I'm a bit worried that all this negativeness, which when you are just describing reality, have the effect that the people, they do not have the hope to fight and win. I think it was John Kerry who said that we should look at us at the war. We were at war. Well, if you're at war, and now I've been fortunate to meet people I respect highly for a reason, which is the people of Ukraine. Those people, they are going to win. They are there to win. And they know when they win, then there will be a better place to live in. And I think we should look at it at the with the same view. And our small country, Iceland, has also a little story to tell. We were so fortunate that the ones who came before us, our mothers and fathers and grandmothers and grandmothers and grandfathers, they saw opportunities using green energy. And we have gone through two green energy transition. Was it easy? No, it's actually very difficult. Much more difficult than the task we are facing now. We were poorer. The technology was nothing compared to what we do have now. And actually, first was we were using hydro for electricity, but when we started harnessing the geothermal, there was no written handbook there, because no one else was doing it. But now we built on this foundation, and this has definitely been the best decision we made by both environmentally but also economically in Iceland. And I look to those people and say, our generation, if they could do it, then we can do it too. And I think that's the message we need to bring on, learn from each other, and be aware of that we will be judged on what we do, and we are going to win.
Thank you. So So now the floor is open for questions either to all of them or to one of them. It's up to you. So let us see where the... Yes, there's one here in the middle. If you can please stand up and get the microphone and introduce yourself. And if, yes, always stay in the back also if you bring the microphone there. Maybe we take 2 questions to start with. Yes, please, and then we go back there.
Thank you. I'm Mariam from the University of Surrey, Professor of International Law. My question is to Excellency for UAE. You mentioned that 70% of the economy does not rely upon hydrocarbons. In comparison, for example, Algeria's government depends upon hydrocarbons for 95% of its income. In the last UAE submission of nationally determined contributions under the Paris Agreement, they acknowledged that hydrocarbons are the largest source of GGEs for the Emirates. My question is whether you can foresee a plan for phased transition out of hydrocarbons in the next submission of the UAE under the Paris Agreement. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, before you answer that, let's take a question from the back.
Hello, my name is Michaela Stith, and I'm the Climate Justice Director for an organization called Native Movement in Alaska. I have a very similar question. His Excellency the Sultan mentioned carbon capture and sequestration, hydrogen, and net zero, each of which are considered false solutions by just transition experts and by grassroots climate leaders because they rely on continued investments in the fossil fuel industry. So I'll repeat a question asked earlier as well. Is ending fossil fuels a goal of COP28, or might it be part of the action plan you've been mentioning?
Okay, you want to start?
Okay, let me first talk about the net zero for the UAE. We were actually the first in our region to announce a net zero by 2050. We announced this in 2021. What's important here is the announcement basically shows that the UAE wants to hit net zero by a certain year. So 2050 is what we see with the technologies available, making sure it's a just transition, that we're there. We actually went further. We didn't just announce a target. Last year at COP27, we announced a net zero pathway. And this pathway basically shows each of our hard-to-abate sectors, be it transportation, building, waste, agriculture. We looked at each of the hard-to-abate sectors and basically mapped out a pathway so that they all come to net zero by 2050. Why I'm saying this, it's important that, first of all, you have the political will, and second, you have a kind of a framework or plan where it is you want to go. Of course, 2050 is many years away, but having this ambition was important because right now, we are working on developing a net zero strategy. And what this is the how. What are the policies we need to put in place? Where does the money need to go in the different sectors so that we can accelerate this? What are the projects and initiatives we need to focus on? Because as you can imagine, we're at a point here and the net zero is down here somewhere. Do we go steep in the beginning and then in the middle and then go again? Or is it a little bit constant and then steep? So the pathway is very important. And by the way, this exercise, I personally was involved in all these hard-to-abate sectors. And every month, since the last 1.5 years, we've been sitting with the different sectors, be it the finance sector, be it the insurance sector, be it the waste sector, the cement sector, and just been having really intense discussions with them on what are the bottlenecks you're facing. We need us to be on this net zero pathway. What do you need from the governments to move forward? So I'm just sharing this with you because we're actually moving ahead with this, and I hope very soon that we're going to be announcing the net zero strategy with all its programs and the policy changes that we'll be doing. Now, the NDC that the UAE just submitted a few months ago, as you all know, I don't know if you know, but when you are when coming on board the Paris Agreement, you're actually committing that every 5 years, you as a country need to commit to how much you're going to reduce your greenhouse gas emissions. Now, we did, of course, because in 2020, we announced our second NDC, but after that, we kept updating it. So just a few months ago, we updated our second NDC for the third time. And this has been happening in the last 3 consecutive years. Why? Again, because I myself spoke to all the different sectors where we work very closely together to say we can do more, we can do more. We're going to be convening the world. We're going to be asking the world to slash emissions because that's how we're going to save the world. We need to walk the talk. And we need to make sure that we're doing whatever we can as a young country to make sure that we're also putting the ambitions high enough, but of course it needs to be realistic as well. So this is why we committed to updating our NDCs, and we will be working, to your question, we will be working on updating it even more and making sure that these hard-to-abate sectors do more. And of course, the fossil fuel sector also has a role to play. Now, I can talk about what we as a country, what we can do. Yes, we have the resources. And I mean, you all know, to build solar panels, to build the wind turbines, you need energy for that. So you need to use the energy systems today to build the energy systems of tomorrow. That's what we need to focus on. And at the same time, decarbonize, decarbonize, decarbonize. So, and please remember that COP28 is a COP of so many members. Now, we cannot say, we as a country will have our commitments that we want to come to, and we say this is what we want to do. But the COP28 team itself needs to listen to all the countries and see what's possible as an international community. So those are my answers. I hope I answered.
Well, thank you very much for that. And let me say from my own personal experience, I have had the privilege of working with the UAE now for more than 15 years. The remarkable thing about that country is they actually deliver on their goals and their promises. Some of us from older political systems are used to people saying all kinds of things, but not necessarily delivering. I think it was 12 years ago or so, I joined Dr. Sultan Al-Jaber out in the desert where he was building the first solar power station in the UAE, the first one. It was huge in terms of screens. Now, as you described in your speech, you have some of the largest solar power projects in the world. And when Masdar was established out in the desert, and I remember that well, intended to be a transformative place for energy transition, that it would, within 10, 15 years, become the second largest global investor in renewable energy all over the world, would have been thought impossible. So I think it is tremendously important to have this oil-rich state leading the charge in renewable energy transition, like His Highness, now the President of the United Arab Emirates, then the Crown Prince Sheikh Mohammed, said 10 years ago, we will celebrate the last barrel of oil.
That's right.
And hopefully some of you here in this hall will be able to join that celebration of the last barrel of oil in Abu Dhabi. So, let me take one final question on this subject from the hall, if there are volunteers. If not,
I see a hand.
Yeah.
Over there.
I see you are better in cheering this.
Sorry.
Yes, there, yes, in the middle, yes.
Thank you. Sean Pryor with the Clean Arctic Alliance. It was really good to hear the message around how we've got to stop the ice melting. For us, that's really important. And we hear a lot about carbon dioxide, but not so much, I think, about black carbon and methane, which are also important in terms of global warming. Black carbon especially has a disproportionate impact on snow and ice. So my question is, how can we eliminate black carbon emissions quickly? They only last in the atmosphere for a matter of days to weeks, so success brings really big results really quickly. And particularly, how can we address black carbon emissions coming from the international shipping sector, which is increasing in the Arctic at this point in time? Thank you.
Well, I will give you the final word, but I will ask your colleagues, the other ministers who are here, to also make brief comments before we close this dialogue.
Yeah, can I just say, and this has reference to the previous question as well, which mentions carbon capture, utilisation and storage, is that as long as there are systems in our societies that burn fossil fuels, we should be doing what we can to take that carbon out of the atmosphere and store it. It is not a solution, it is not a single solution, and it does not mean that you stop reducing emissions as much as possible. But there we've just pointed to, in shipping, for example, we've pointed to an area that's going to be hard to decarbonise. In Scotland, we have got industrial processes that are hard to decarbonise. Every country has. So that's where CCUS can come in until we get to a point where we have our systems which are not leaching greenhouse gases into the... But at the same time, the innovation needs to ramp up in terms of e-fuels, because e-fuels are the future. And I heard yesterday that Iceland has an electric plane, which kind of frightened me on the one hand. I was told it only lasts for 30 minutes unless it's really windy, and I thought, I'm not going on that plane. But the very fact that that's even happening means that it's almost like small countries probably can go first on some of the innovation. And then as it gets tested in the small countries and the small distances, then it grows and grows and grows. But until we've got that situation where we have e-fuels powering everything, where we stop burning hydrocarbons, we need to figure out a way to take that carbon out of the atmosphere.
I can assure you the plane is not going up today.
Thank you.
But it's okay, and both the President and the Prime Minister have flown in it, but I think it's a perfect example of how things are developing very fast. And we are seeing, because you mentioned e-fuels, which of course is something what we need, but there's also many good news, for example, that we are now seeing the largest trucks we have, which can be used, driven on electricity, which means that we use the energy in a much better way. So there's a lot of things helping us, and we need to look at all aspects, both when it comes to carbon and, of course, new technology. I am still so pleased. I saw a headline the other day, which made me very happy. It said, "Forget about solar panels. Rain panels is the new thing." That's something for us Icelanders. And but regarding your question, I think I'm not maybe exactly answering it. It's just that it's always the same thing. We also need to get rid of things that are really harming us, and we need to do it both domestically and also we need international cooperation. And when we were chairing the Arctic Council, this was the main emphasis, is that to get rid of black carbon and other things that we don't. I don't want to repeat what you said, but we need to look at so many things. This is a huge elephant, and we need to slice it in little pieces.
Since we are getting the sign here that we have to conclude this, I will just give you 10, 15 seconds to conclude this.
We are big fans of innovations, and I'm just going to give a small story. Of course, growing up in the UAE, berries, for example, blueberries, were always tasteless. Nowadays, we're growing berries in the desert, and that's because of innovations, because we're now able to recirculate the water in a closed farm. And now the berries taste amazing. So the power of innovation is incredible. And we all know that right now, we cannot just switch off our energy from one energy to the next. Because as I said in my speech, it's not only the money that needs to come to build these new facilities, it's also the intellectual transition, the upskilling that's needed. And all this needs to happen together and in a just way.
Well, thank you very much for traveling all the way from the desert in the Middle East to be with us.
I might have to stay a bit longer now because of the wind. Thank you.
I'm happy we gave you an example of the weather patterns.
Thank you.
In the north. And I know you're going to join a number of others in various meetings and dialogues later today and tomorrow. And I also want to thank your colleagues for joining us here on the stage. So let us give the three climate ministers thanks of applause.